in this moment, we are confronted in the valley. And we need to have the boldness of David, that despite the insecurities that the enemy is trying to sow in our heart about our faith, that we will stand bold and say that in the same way that God gave me the victory then, I will have boldness today. God bless you, church family. We're going to be basing our message today on 1 Samuel chapter 17. It's a very iconic chapter in the Bible, very notorious story of David and Goliath. But let's bring it just a little bit into context, because maybe you never heard the context of who is David and why is this battle more significant, not just because there's a beast who's going to be slain, a beast of a man that's going to be slain, but there's a context to God and the kingdom of Israel in this moment. You see, God's original intention for Israel was that he would be king over Israel. There would not be a sole monarch, human, placed on a throne for Israel, but that God himself would be the one in his authority to speak to Israel and reign over them with the rules, the laws that he gave to them with Moses. And so, why is there a king? In this point of the story, we see that there's a king whose name is Saul. And the reason there's this king is because Israel demanded out of God a king, because they saw that the nations that surrounded them had a king that they would follow, that they would receive direction from. And I understand Israel's qualm. Like, it's now and today, it's hard for us to want to have peace, or be able to even have peace with a God that we cannot see, serve someone that we do not can see the expression on their face. Are we doing a good job? Are we not doing a good job? Someone that I can't just walk up to you and say, hey, this is my questions about what you had said. And so that Israel demanded of God a king. At this moment, the reason this book is called Samuel is because there's a prophet that God is using to articulate his desire and direct the kingdom of Israel in that moment to do his will, giving them victory in certain battles. And so God, through his prophet Samuel, anoints an honorable man whose name is Saul. And Saul was a whole head and shoulders taller than everyone else. He kind of fit the bill exactly as to what the people of Israel wanted. And God's desire was that Saul would be one, yes, who would appease the people with how he looked and have the position of king, but that Saul would be one who was submitted onto God's will. And essentially that Saul would just be a physical representation in the moment of what God is doing in Israel, and that God can use Saul to bring victories for Israel. Because the reason that Israel was established was so that in that time, Israel could reflect God's goodness. That there could be a people who were submitted unto God, and because they were submitted unto God, they would be blessed. Now, what ends up happening is that over a little bit of time, we see that Saul begins to fall away, and the people of Israel begin to fall away from the desires of God. And Saul begins to act in his own strength. He begins to act in his own will, and he loses the favor and the grace of God. This is one of the few rare moments that we see that the word actually articulates, and that God had a regret. That he regretted anointing Saul to be the king of Israel, to be the one who directs and reflects his goodness. And so God anoints another. There's this young man whose name is David, who was a shepherd of his father's few sheep. And he was the youngest of the family, who was not someone who was meant to have any inheritance, any birthright. But God chooses him because he sees the valiance in his heart, and the faith and the humility and the boldness at the same time in his heart, and the love that he has for God. The word is clearly articulating over and over throughout the story of David. And it specifically states that David was a man who was after God's own heart. And so God anoints this young man who has no inheritance, who has no birthright, who has no authority in himself other than his faith, to be the next king of Israel. I'm going to cut to where we are in Samuel chapter 17. David has older brothers, and his older brothers are part of the army of Saul. And so David's father Jesse sends his youngest son, go bring food to your brother in the army. Now, like I mentioned before, there's this beast whose name is Goliath. And so he was a part of a tribe that was called the Philistines. And we see over and over in the book of Judges and in the first few books of the Bible as well, that there are a tribe of Philistines who are actively coming against the kingdom of Israel. And in previous chapters before, Saul and his son Jonathan had no problem whooping some Philistines' butt. God gave them the victory. But now the grace has left. The honor has left. And Saul is being tormented by these spirits. And that's how he knew David in the first place, right? Because he was being tormented by these spirits. And because David, yes, was also a minstrel on top of being a shepherd, God allowed David to be in Saul's courts to play music for him to drive away these wicked spirits. Now, David comes upon this battlefield where his brothers are, and he sees that there has been this giant who has been bad-mouthing Israel and the God of Israel. And the proposition the giant has for them is that he is saying that he is the best of the Philistines, and that he wants to battle the best of the Israelites. And whoever gets the victory against one another, the entire kingdom and the entire tribe would be the servants of the other. If Goliath wins, Israel is servant unto the Philistines. And if Israelite wins, the Philistines would be servant. The Philistines will be servant unto Israel. And this is how I know David is cooler than me, even at a young age. David says, then David spoke to the men who stood by him, saying, this is after he gives his brother the food. He says, what shall be done for the man who kills the Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? So David says this, and his older brothers and the soldiers in the area all look at him like, who are you? Because David was this little dude. He was young, but he was also a little small, a little scrawny. He said he was good looking, but also rugged looking. And David doesn't seem like the person who's going to answer this problem of this behemoth of a soldier who's preventing himself in front of the army. And the reason that they had doubt in David wasn't just because of his size. It was also because they had doubt in themselves. You see, it had been numerous amounts of days that this Philistine had been bad-mouthing and trash-talking and speaking bad about God and all these armies, and no one had stepped up. No one had the courage to even speak up or be the one to take on the challenge. And so they didn't have boldness for themselves. So how would they have confidence in this young man? Even the king that they had elected, they had no confidence in. And so when they hear David saying these things about this uncircumcised Philistine and what's the reward, speaking with such boldness, such candor, they think, what is this egotistical little boy even talking about? But David, in his boldness, brings this even up to Saul, because he heard that the reward for Saul, for killing this Philistine, was that Saul would honor him and give him his spouse, give him his daughter to marry. Right, and so David tells Saul that he's going to do this, and Saul doubts him too. He's like, who are you? What, like, you're just some kid. Right, that's unbelievable. Imagine a kid who's about to play LeBron James in an NBA basketball game. Like, he's going to just be demolished and squashed. There's no competition. But this is what David says to Saul. We're in 1 Samuel 17. We're going to read from verse 34 to 37. 34 to 37. David said to Saul, your servant used to keep his father's sheep. And when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went after it and struck it and delivered the lamb from its mouth. And when it rose against me, I caught it by its beard. David was cold. I caught it by its beard and struck it and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. Moreover, David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, and your Lord be with you. You see, David wasn't prideful. He wasn't egotistical. He was bold, but he was not the egotist that they thought he was. David killed the bears and the lion with his two bare hands. He said he grabbed them by the beard and struck them dead. Mind you, after he had the boldness to see them snagged up, strike them, and rip the lamb out of the lion's mouth, out of the bear's mouth. So the reason, though, that David says that he was able to do this, he had this boldness, was because he understood who God was to him. He understood that he had trust and love and honor, and that he believed that God's grace would grant him the victory every single time. There was another bear, there was another lion, there's another reason to be afraid. David's heart for the boldness of God counteracted the fear of the lion, of the beast that was before him, and he grabbed the lamb out of the mouth of the beast. And so when he sees this Philistine, he says, all right, so what's the plan here? Why are we all just standing around? Because in his heart, he already knew God had given him the victory. And this proof that David had this heart and this faith in God, because after he gets on the field, right, he gets to this field and all he has in his possession are 5 stones and a slingshot. And you guys know this part of the story, I'm sure. You've heard this part of the story, that David gets to this field and Goliath, the same attitude, like, this is who they're sending. And I'm going to kill you and feed your flesh to the birds of the air because of how small he was. This is David's response. And again, David is cool and cold. He says, this day the Lord will deliver you into my hand. I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Then all the assembly shall know that the Lord does not save by the sword and by the spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you onto our hands. David knew. David wasn't speaking because he had just had faith. There was a surety in his heart that the God who never failed him then is the God who will not fail him in that moment. And so David, we all know the story, strings his slingshot and strikes the Philistine in his head, Goliath, and kills Goliath. Then he walks up to Goliath's body, takes the sword, the Goliath's sword, takes the sword off and cuts off Goliath's head himself and lifts up the giant's head in victory and brings the head before the king and receives his reward. Now, this is my question for you. We did all of this context and we gave all of this story, and I remembered of how God gave David this victory. There was a little man against the big dad, the underdog against the big dog, and God gave him the victory. But my question for you, when was the last time you went into battle for God's glory? When was the last time that you had the heart to say, I'm going to confront this evil in my life. I'm going to confront this evil in the lives of those around me, knowing that God is going to not only give me the victory, but I'm going to do it for his glory. See, we don't always think about the things that are in our lives in that way. We think about, yes, I'm struggling through this thing, and one day I'm going to get through it for God's grace. Maybe by God's grace, I'll find a victory. Amen. But there's a level of boldness that comes with intimacy with the Lord that says, I'm going to grab this by the beard and I'm going to strike it dead. This story holds a lot of weight in context to where we are in our faith now, because there is beasts and Goliaths afoot. The armies stood on the sidelines because there was so much doubt sown into them by the enemy. Not only was there a threat that was present, but that threat kept diminishing their faith and their belief in who God was and what he could do for them. And I think the same is true today. And what I mean by that is that there are things in my life that have held me back, that my depression has held me back. My anxiety has had me back in my past. But the Lord, through his word, through faith and through prayer, has delivered me. See, depression does not have the same grip on me that it used to. It has no grip on me anymore. Anxiety doesn't have the same grip on me. It has no grip on me anymore. Because the Lord has given me, by his grace, the authority to grab those by the beard and strike them dead. It was not in my strength that I overcame the depression that was on my life. It was not in my strength that the suicide left my mind. It was by the grace that the Lord has given to me through my intimacy with him that he delivered me from the mouth of the beast and the lies of the enemy that had me doubt in the power of faith. And so what I'm trying to communicate with us is that here in this moment, we are confronted in the valley. Just like Israel was confronted by the Philistines, we're confronted in the valley. And we need to have the boldness of David that despite the insecurities that the enemy is trying to sow in our heart about our faith, that we will stand bold and say that in the same way that God gave me the victory then, I will have boldness today. But I'm here to tell you that conquering and that faith doesn't come by just having the boldness to grab the beard. It comes specifically out of the place of love for the Lord, intimacy with him. See, if David did not know of the goodness of God, if he did not spend time worshiping and praising him, he never would have had the faith to even come and drag the lamb out of the mouth of the bear. And I think that that's true for us today too. I believe that God is calling us to be a generation that understands God's heart and can put our faith before the Goliaths and faith before the beliefs, because we have taken the time to allow God to come into our hearts and build deep roots of love and of thankfulness and of grace. You see, I stand boldly for God, not because I just seen Goliaths come down. And yes, by God's grace, this week we received great news that us standing boldly for God and putting our faith in prayer. There was a sister who we had the honor of praying for her mother who has cancer. And this week we received the amazing news that she's cancer-free. See, that's a Goliath that got demolished by boldness and faith, not by pride and by our ego. And that faith came from, we understand that there's a God who loves us and wants what's best for us. We've been in his word, we have been in worship and in prayer with him, and he has revealed himself to us. And so the title of today's message is Not For Yourself. Sometimes you hear the title and you think, man, is he just getting started? No. We're actually at the close. The title of today's message is Not For Yourself. David confronted this Goliath, but it's because he had a relationship with God that gave him the boldness to say, this victory is going to come by God and for God. What you're confronting isn't going to be defeated by your ability to overwhelm the enemy with his swords and with the spears, like David was saying. It's going to come out of the boldness that you receive when you have a relationship with God. And I want to pray that for us in this moment, the lies of the enemy that led us to believe that this is going to be in our strength and that the reward for the victory in this battle is going to be just for us are all melted away. We are not fighting for just ourselves, and the victory won't come in our own strength. We are fighting for the glory of God in the land. We are standing bold out of the love that we have for God. It is not out of the pride that we have for our faith, the rigidness of religion. It is out of the boldness that we have seen the one who has died for us. We have received his love, and it has made us bold for him.